Howdy y'all, Rowan here. I would like to apologize in advance if my voice is like super echoey and the audio is very bad. I am currently filming in my new apartment. There's nothing up on the walls and I don't have a microphone set up yet. So I'm recording on my phone camera right now. I'm trying to keep my mouth as close to the microphone as possible, but I move around a lot when I make videos, so I may not even be able to post this to YouTube. When I finish filming, we'll see how it is. Maybe the acoustics are great in here. You never know. But I've got my little drinky today. I have a stack of books over here that are some of my favorite books I've ever read. And I have a desire to talk about tarot decks that I don't have. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about my 4 favorite books of all time. And you'll see that there's very little difference between these books except for one that kind of stands out. But they're very similar to each other in vibe, even if the contents are not the same. But I have picked out tarot decks that I think match each of these books in energy. However, these are decks that I do not have in my collection. These are decks that are out in the world that, so I was able to pick from all of the decks that I could think of to say if I think they belong with this book or this book belongs with this deck or whatever, right? So I was able to free my mind a little bit from the confines of what I own. And when I was making this video, I thought that I could totally just like use the decks that I had, and then one of the books I knew it has to be this specific deck that I do not have. That's the deck that matches the energy of this book. I don't have anything that matches the energy of that particular book. And I looked and I looked and I looked and I went through my oracles and I went through my tarot and I went through my playing cards, and there just wasn't anything that was quite right. So I said, fuck it, we're gonna make the entire thing nothing but decks I don't have. So that's what we're doing. So the first book I would like to talk about, this is actually not one of my favorite books, but it is it's not one of my favorite books ever, but it is one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors. And my favorite author is Stephen King, so there's a lot to choose from there. My favorite book by Stephen King is The Shining, but I didn't want to talk about The Shining today. I wanted to talk about CARRIE. So this book is about a young girl who deals with family and religious trauma, and she is very sheltered and kept in a highly religious household where her mother, who is her only guardian, regularly abuses her and locks her in a closet as a form of punishment for hours and hours on end, forcing CARRIE to use the restroom in the closet at times and starving CARRIE while she's in there. So there are other things about CARRIE that you need to know, like when she was younger, she made rocks fall on her house. She has abilities. CARRIE has psychokinetic abilities that allow, or I think the book calls them telekinetic abilities, and these allow her to move things with her mind. She has very little control over these abilities, however, and the book follows her as these abilities begin to unfold when she gets her first period. This book explores the way those kinds of powers in the hands of the ultimately downtrodden show up when basically it's a metaphor for the way people who are kicked over and over again eventually explode. It's not too far off from Firestarter, except in Firestarter it's a kid and in CARRIE it's a teenager. And CARRIE is just one of these books about womanhood that is astonishingly on the nose for somebody who's never been a woman or had any experience tangentially related to womanhood. And actually, I don't like that I'm using that word here. Let me go back and correct myself. It's not about womanhood, it's about perioddom. It is about socially constructed womanhood, and it is about, specifically, it is about the ways in which society and our parents let us down with what they teach us in order to prepare us for this social life. I mean, it's about a lot of other things too, but that's one of the themes. And it's a fabulous book. It's not very long. If you would like to get into Stephen King and you don't know where to start, I highly recommend with CARRIE. It was his first novel. It can be yours as well. It's a quick read. It's really powerful. And the deck that I would choose to go with it, I'm going to put on the screen here, is the Mars Power Tarot. This deck is Rage. Dawn Michelle calls it her Rage deck, and so do her friends now. And when I thought of CARRIE, this is the deck that I thought of, because CARRIE the character is typified by her rage, by her anger at the mistreatment that she has faced over and over again, and by realizing that mistreatment, coming to terms with the fact that everybody is treating you like shit, even the people you think are being nice to you. And it's so painful, and this deck is the only deck that was loud and kinetic enough to embody the energy that our main character eventually obtains as she moves through the story. So that is my first book. My next choice is going to be The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. This is one of my favorite books. Oh my God, I had to read it for school, and it's just one of those books that I read for school and I went, oh, sometimes books are good when you have to read them. This is about a family that is highly religious, and the father figure of this family is a missionary. That's the word for it. He's a missionary, and his wife and daughters get dragged along, at first excitedly and then reluctantly and then abhorred at what is happening. Hi, baby. That's my cat jumping up on the table there. You see his little tail? But they go to the Congo, and this is set in, I want to say maybe like somewhere between the 70s and the 90s. Oh yeah, wow. Okay, so this is set in the 60s. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I don't know why I thought it was so late in the game. What are you doing, Gutsu-sama? But this is, oh my God, this is a book that is so hard to read. Let me say it that way. This is a book that is fucking painful to get through. But if you can get through this book, if you've got any kind of religious trauma, if you've got any kind of trauma from like familial members, if you've got patriarchy trauma, this book might not be something that you can easily make it through, but that doesn't mean it's not worth the fucking read. This is one of those books that purges things. This is one of those books that purifies. It's tragic in the hubris of man. It's definitely a story about hubris. It's abso-fucking-lutely a story about religious fervor and religious pride. And it is about the way those things mostly impact the people who are not experiencing them directly. It's about the way missionary work is actually really harmful to both the missionaries and the people that they're attempting to proselytize to. It's a fabulous book. It's so difficult to get through, and it is so worth the read. It is beautifully written, and now I have a whole host of Barbara Kingsolver books on my to-read list. I have struggled through a couple of them, wanting them to be this one, and they weren't, and so I need to set those expectations aside and enjoy her books individually. So that's, we'll talk in a little bit about why I haven't gotten into why I haven't read more Barbara Kingsolver despite reading this book in high school. It is so soft and beat up because it was in my purse so much because I took this back and forth to school. But the deck that I would recommend for this book is, this one's an interesting one, and some people might disagree with me if they've read it, but the Marielle Tarot. This book has, this tarot deck has insane Christian religious undertones, but it's also not what you expect it to be. So one of the big things that the family deals with when they go to the politically rife Congo is that they are ill-prepared for the environment that they find themselves in. Their pride has told them that if they do certain things, they will be ready for whatever God throws at them. However, they get there and they realize that they are foolish, that they were misinformed, that they were haughty, and that they were just so ill-prepared for what was going to happen to them. And the Marielle Tarot is one that if you come into with Rider-Waite-Smith's terminology or keywords or experience, you are going to have a bad time if you try to rely solely upon that with the Marielle Tarot. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know. I don't have the deck, but I have heard that it has heavy religious undertones and that it is basically its own amalgamation system. And because of that, I have chosen it for the Poisonwood Bible. The next book that I want to talk about is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Here is another book about female rage. So I don't know if you can tell by my voice, but I was assigned female at birth. I have not taken any sort of hormone replacement therapy or anything like that. So this is the voice that I naturally have, and it is heavily influenced by the estrogen in my system. I don't identify as strictly woman anymore. I'm gender fluid, so there are days when I am woman and there are days when I am not. But because womanhood is so intrinsic to my experience, even as a non-binary gender fluid person, because being raised as a woman and being expected to perform as a woman has been so ground into, in part by religious institutions, in part by social institutions, and in part by self expectation. And of course, you know, there's family and whatnot. But because of all of those reasons, I do prefer to explore the feminine coded female experience, womanhood, what have you. There's not really a good way to say that, but like I am more connected with that side of my gender just because of my lived experience, and the masculine aspects to my gendered experience are still connected to those feminine experiences, even if does that make sense? Am I making sense, or am I just babbling? Anyway, the whole point of that is that I find mostly that the ways in which society have failed women are more interesting to write stories about versus the ways in which society has failed men. That's what I was getting at there. So Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House is another book about a feminine experience. This is about a specifically queer feminine experience. I'm sorry, these books are not explicitly queer, but there's not a way to read The Haunting of Hill House that does not include recognizing that the main character has romantic feelings for other female characters. Like it's textual. It's not explicit, but it's in the fucking text. So The Haunting of Hill House explores a group of people that get called to a very haunted house to do some very 60s style haunted house exploration. It's super good. It's super short. It's Shirley Jackson. It's a little bit funny and biting. It's a little bit ethereal and floaty. It's a little bit, but not quite stream of conscious at parts. It's divine. I love this book. The main character is Eleanor, and she hated her okay. Let me read you. First of all, the icon. I haven't done this with any of the other books. I'm so sorry. You can tell that this one is just special. The first time we read about our main character, it says, Eleanor Vance was 32 years old when she came to Hill House. The only person in the world she genuinely hated, now that her mother was dead, was her sister. So that's where Eleanor is, and she deals with overbearing people controlling her life and her own meek and mild temperament, and she has to go through the world with that, and she has to go through Hill House with that. Hill House, neither living nor dead, represents... In many ways, Hill House could be read to represent the weight of familial sin and expectation rolled into one, because some of the stories of the people who lived in Hill House before Eleanor gets there mirror the lived experiences Eleanor has before she gets to Hill House. Not in any one-to-one way, but like emotionally. And so... I'm trying to sell you the book. Read the fucking book. The deck that I would use to match this book is actually this one. This one was opposite of the others. This one, once I found the deck that was for it in my collection, I had a really hard time moving away from that. This one was the only one that I had a deck in my collection where I was like, that's the one. But I would use the Antique Anatomy Tarot you can't see it. That's just a bag. I would use the Antique Anatomy Tarot, but since I want to use one that's not in my collection, we're going to go with an Oracle deck on this one. The Memento Mori Oracle. This is one that I may buy soon. I'm trying to talk myself out of purchasing it right now. It's on a Riffle and Time shop, and that's the most convenient way to purchase it I've seen so far. And so I have not pulled the trigger yet, but I've been looking at it. My only issue is that there's no true color in it. That's my gripe. That's the thing that's keeping me... Oh, excuse me. That's the thing that's keeping me from getting this deck. However, this deck really embodies the Hill House aesthetic. And honestly, I think Memento Mori is even better for this book than the tarot deck is, because this deck is a bunch of pictures of items that are associated with death. This deck is a bunch of mortician instruments. It's a couple of... I think there's like some things that are loosely related to like carnivals and freak shows. There's some things that are related to taxidermy, I want to say. So it's a really big deck. It's got a lot in it, but it's all related to death in some way, shape, or form. And it's very Hill House in vibe, I guess, in aura. Is that what the kids are saying now? They're saying aura instead of vibe. That's what my husband says. So like it's got the same aura as The Haunting of Hill House, but it's a little bit dead. It's a little bit alive. It's a little bit threatening to kill you. It's a little bit reminding you that you might want to kill yourself, which is what Hill House does to our main character. Like, all of those things get into Eleanor's head, and she is just totally undone by the house and by the way it influences the relationships that she tries to develop with the other people in the house. And this deck feels like that energy. So, Memento Mori. And then finally, my last choice here is Markus Zusak's I Am the Messenger. This is different than the rest. This is not a horror story. This is a YA novel that I fell in love with when I was in high school. This is a story about a guy who starts receiving strange postcards, and by postcards I mean playing cards that have instructions written on them in the mail. I have not read this book in a very long time, but I remember that some of the things that I loved about it the most were the ways in which it explores how every single human on this planet has a story that you don't know about that is infinitely more complicated than you can ever imagine. This book explores the ways in which humans interact with each other in an almost web-like way, and it's really beautiful. It also does something, well, I can't spoil it, but it does a thing that I like it when books do, I especially liked it when I was a teenager, let me put it that way. The pages are yellowed. This is so old. Oh, I love that. But this, Markus Zusak is the same author who wrote The Book Thief, if you remember that movie about the German girl who steals books during World War II. This is the same author, and so it's that same sort of dreamy style that he has. It's very head in the clouds, which is my energy through and through. Let me show you. See, he gets playing cards with instructions on them. And for all of my tarot lovers out there, that's probably going to speak to you, right? And if you like YA, if you can stomach YA even a little bit, I mean, this is not an exceptionally YA book. It's just not, it's not challenging the way Barbara Kingsolver is, right? It's going to be a lot lighter than Poisonwood Bible, but it's still very purple in its prose. So if you enjoy a well-written book, you will not be disappointed with I Am the Messenger. Markus Zusak is a brilliant author. So I highly recommend this one. And the deck that I would choose for I Am the Messenger is Tarot Disassembled. The way in which this deck breaks down the archetypes of the symbolism in a tarot deck is very similar to the ways in which the archetypes of his friends and the expectations of his relationships, the main character's relationships, are broken down throughout I Am the Messenger, and the ways in which he starts to see the recurring themes and also the individual special aspects of the people around him. I don't want to talk too long about this one because we are just about at the 10-minute mark for my little camera that's recording here, which will make this video 20 minutes almost exactly. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. Let me know some of your favorite books and the tarot decks that you would connect to them down below in the comments. I'm going to go film another video now probably. I appreciate you. Oh God, I'm running out of time. Oh, who's driving the car? Oh no, a deer. Okay, I'm sorry about that. That was unnecessarily cruel of me. Thank you all for hanging out. I'm sorry this video is longer than 20 minutes. I tried to keep this a short one, but I'm really good at talking. I'm so good at talking. So thank you for hanging out with me. Please, listen to me. Okay, so the thing that I came back on here to talk about, actually, I don't want to say goodbye just yet. I want to say, I don't know if any of you who were bookworms when you were kids struggle with this, but something that I really deal with is that these days as an adult, I really struggle to read. I'm still as good at reading as I was when I was a kid, maybe a little bit rusty because I haven't done it, but it's not about like speed or focus. It's about the anxiety that reading brings me. Now as an adult, I don't feel like I can get as into books as I did when I was a kid, and that I'm trying to get past that. When I was a kid, I used books as escapism because I didn't have very much control over my circumstances and I didn't like my life very much. And now as an adult, I don't have those same things in my way. And so reading is actually, it's not a coping mechanism for me anymore. It's something I need to do because it brings me joy. I need to actively try to do it because it enriches my life and makes life more worth living, rather than it being a necessary coping mechanism that gets me out of the painful here and now. And I've found that I really struggle with reading books that challenge me, because while it is really important to be challenged when you read, I also need some fluff, but I'm really bad at finding fluff. So I would actually really appreciate it if anybody has some good recommendations for stupid, fluffy romance books, or stupid, fluffy YA books, honestly, because I need to stop having like this block between me and reading new things. And I think part of that is that I'm reading stuff that's really challenging, and I'm expecting myself to read stuff that's really challenging. And what I actually need is something that's a gentle, warm hug in between really challenging topics. So I would love book recommendations, particularly in romance or science fiction or horror, but horror's a lot harder to get light and fluffy. But like if you've got recommendations for those genres, I would fucking love to hear them. So please leave those in the comments down below, or make a VR to this and share books that you love. That would be really cool if anybody made like a response to this. I'm not going to create a tag. That's up to y'all. I don't care that much. But yeah, decks I don't have that I would like to. Well, honestly, I don't want all of these decks. I want Tarot Disassembled and Mars Power and Memento Mori a little bit. I'm trying to talk myself out of Memento Mori, but I don't want the Marielle at all. At one point I did, but then I found out how much Christian stuff is in it, and I decided it's not for me. Maybe someday I'll change my mind, but right now I don't want the Marielle at all. Anyway, thank you for hanging out. Sorry about hitting a deer in front of you all. That was really bad driving on my part. I love you. Mwah. Bye.